When you're embroidering, your embroidery hoop is what holds your fabric and your stabilizer as the machine is embroidering. Your machine came with two different size hoops. There's the 100 by 100 millimeter hoop and the 260 by 150 millimeter hoop, which is a little bigger. When you're picking the size hoop, you basically just want to pick the size that's the closest to the size of your embroidery design. So if you're doing something small, it'll fit in the small hoop, choose that one. If you're doing something a little bigger that won't fit in that hoop, then go with the bigger one. So let's talk about some of the parts of the hoop, just to kind of get familiar with what it looks like. So first of all, when you're looking at your hoop, you should have the hoop connector, which is this part sticking out, on the left-hand side, and your quick release lever and retaining screw should be in the lower right. So that's how you know you're looking at it the right way. The way that the hoop works is that this part is going to slide onto the hoop connector assembly on the embroidery arm, and then there's an inner hoop and an outer hoop, and your fabric and stabilizer is held between them, kind of sandwiched in there. So to put fabric in, you're going to take out the inner hoop. To do that, you're going to open the quick release lever, which just snaps open like that, and you're going to take out the inner hoop. When you're ready to put it back in, you put it back in, and then we're going to close the quick release lever. It's really, really important that you never force this closed. If you're trying to close it and it's too hard to close, then you know it's too tight. It should be pretty easy. If it's too tight, just go ahead and loosen the retaining screw until this closes nice and easily, and then you can tighten the retaining screw back up, kind of like a fine-tuning to make sure that the outer hoop is nice and snug against the inner hoop. If you look at the inner hoop, you'll see that there's some text on it. It says Singer at the top, and then the bottom says the size. You always want to make sure that that is right side up when you're looking at it. That way you know that the inner hoop is in there properly. You'll also notice that there's some marks on all the sides of your hoop. This shows the embroidery area and also the centers. So the center marks on each side marks the center of the embroidery area, and the outer two marks mark the boundaries of the embroidery area. You'll notice if you look at it that the side marks are offset a little bit. That's because there's some room left up towards the top of the hoop for the presser foot as the hoop moves around during embroidery. So that's why the marks are slightly offset. So now let's go over how to actually put your fabric and your stabilizer into the hoop. There's a couple different ways you can do it, so we're going to talk about the standard way first. This way works well for stable fabrics and fabrics that aren't too thick or heavy. So like quilting cottons, lightweight, home decor fabrics, things like that. So I have a piece of quilting cotton and a piece of tearaway stabilizer behind it, so I'm going to put this in the hoop. So the first thing I'll do is take out that inner hoop. So I'm going to open my quick release lever, take out the inner hoop. I'm going to take my fabric and my stabilizer and lay it down right on top of my outer hoop. And I'll take my inner hoop and put it down on top. Again, you always want to look for that text and make sure that it's right side up. I'm going to push it down inside the outer hoop. If it's too hard to push down in there, you can loosen your retaining screw a little bit until this pushes down easily. And you want to make sure that the fabric is taut, not stretched, but you know, you don't want any like wrinkles or ripples in it. Once your inner hoop is pushed down all the way, you can close the retaining screw. Again, you never want to force this. If it's too hard to snap shut, loosen the screw until you can close it easily. Then you can use the screw to tighten it back up and make sure that the outer hoop is nice and snug against the inner hoop. So that is kind of the most standard way to hoop up your project. Now let's talk about a hoopless way to embroider, which sounds a little bit misleading because you still use the hoop. But this is a great way to hoop fabric that is either too thick to put in the hoop or scars easily, like velvet or vinyl. It would probably leave an impression if you were to squeeze it in between the two layers. So in this way, we're gonna hoop just the stabilizer and the fabric is gonna float on top so that it's a little bit less stressed. So for this, we will just take our stabilizer only, and I'm gonna hoop it up the same way that I just hooped up the fabric and stabilizer. We'll push this down, the inner hoop down in the outer hoop, and then we'll close our quick release lever. Again, making sure to not have that be too tight. So now that our stabilizer is hooped, we can take the fabric that we're going to embroider and just lay it down right on top and make sure that it's nice and smooth. And when you do hoopless embroidery, you want to make sure you activate the baste function on your machine, which will put a square of basting stitches around your embroidery area. And that's going to be what holds the fabric against your stabilizer. And we'll talk more about the baste function when we do the stitch out video. So if you are trying to align your fabric in your hoop, like I said, you want to go off the marks on the hoop. So I'm going to show you an easy way to do that. So I'll take out my stabilizer. So let's say you want to make sure that you center your fabric piece in your hoop for your embroidery design. Again, that means centered in the embroidery area, not necessarily centered in the physical edges of the hoop. So I have this fabric and I'm going to finger press it, which basically means crease it, kind of like a piece of paper. The reason I'm doing that is because it makes it really easy to see the center of each edge. So once it's all creased, there is a really obvious line where you can definitely see the centers of both edges. And so this would be the center of my piece of fabric. So now I can take my stabilizer, I'm going to just slide it right under my fabric, and I'll take my inner hoop, and remember there's all of these markings on it, so I'm going to look for the center marks on each side, and I'm going to put the inner hoop down right on top of the fabric so that the center marks on each side are aligned with the center creases. And then I'll just grab all of it, take it and put it down in the outer hoop, push it down in there like that. I will close the quick release lever, and remember to loosen the screw if it's too tight. Tighten that up so it's nice and taut, and now my fabric is nice and centered in my hoop. So that's how you hoop up your fabric in your stabilizer. So now we are ready to do an embroidery stitch out. So that's what we're going to do in the next episode.